Today we're going to look into the question of why don't you just buy a boat? When looking at a fishing kayak, you probably heard this a lot. Some of you may even have said it before. And today I'm going to go over the key differences. I'm going to go over, do you really save money in the long run going kayak over John boat? And which one's the best value for you? Stay tuned to the end. I'm going to kind of go over some things to look for if you're still struggling between the options of boat or kayak, and hopefully make the decision a little bit easier for you. As always, let's get right into it, guys. Okay, so we're going to talk about the key differences between specifically John boats and kayaks. And the most obvious one is the build. So your John boats are typically going to be metal, namely aluminum, and your kayaks are going to be polyethylene plastic. And we're going to focus on the roto-molded one-piece kayaks because it's a better comparison. You can go thermoform two-piece. You're going to go a little bit lower, obviously, on the price scale, but for comparison's sake, between an aluminum John boat, we're going to go with that roto-molded kayak. So the biggest difference that's going to give you in the two is going to be weight. Obviously, there's extremes on one end or the other. Your heavier kayaks are going to be around that 150 to 170 pound range. But the heavier on your John boats, the John boat average is going to be about 400 or 500 pounds. Can you find one around 80 pounds or 100 pounds? Yes, but you can also find them around 1,000 pounds, which is insane to me. So just know that is a big key difference there. And really the most obvious, your John boats are typically going to be motor propelled. They're going to be motorized. Now you can do that to certain kayaks, but your kayaks are always going to typically be paddle or pedal drive. And so there's a little bit more options for your propulsion on a kayak, but at the fundamental core, you can motorize both of them to an extent, but John boats are 99% going to be propelled by motors. So the next part of this is, do you really save money with one over the other? And that's kind of a tricky question. So it depends on obviously which kayak or which John boat you're looking at. I'm not going to compare a Hobie Pro Angler 14 foot at around almost $6,000 to a Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace John boat that's collecting dust for years and you can buy it for $200 or $300. So at its core, kayaks are typically going to be your lower upfront cost. But in the long run, you're typically going to see a higher price long run cost with a John boat. And even specifically a used one that's been sitting around for a long period of time. What kind of condition is that motor in? Do you have any leaks in this? Because repairing your aluminum John boats can be a little tricky. Same thing with used kayaks. So used kayaks, you're looking for cracks, you're looking for wear spots, any kind of rash from them dragging it. So there's some give and take to both of them. But in certain circumstances, you can see a higher upfront cost with a kayak versus the John boat, but your long-term cost is definitely going to be in favor of the kayak, whether you're going higher end or mid to lower end. Just in that you're motorized, you're maintaining that motor, you're changing the oil every 100 hours, your fuel costs, your launch fees, there is going to be, and then insurance. So depending on your state's regulations, insurance is typically needed in anything over a certain horsepower rating. You can stay below that, obviously, but at that point, that's pretty much the same motor that you can put on a kayak too. So just know that your overall scope of things and the cost of it, that is always something that you need to consider. Okay, so which one of these is the best value for you personally? Well, that's really gonna force you to answer some questions about what you want the kayak to do or the John boat to do, what your needs are, what body of water you're typically floating, yada, yada, yada. So the biggest difference to me as far as which one is best for you is going to be depending on what you're hauling. You're fishing out of both of them, obviously, but do you want to haul more than one person with you? So more than yourself, obviously. So if you're wanting to haul an extra person or two, John boat's probably going to be the best option. I always suggest looking at 2 solo kayaks if you've got somebody you want to come with you, instead of investing in a tandem fishing kayak. So tandem fishing kayaks, there are some advantages to those, but one thing you always want to consider, if both of you are wanting to fish, you're really close together, and your least experienced angler and paddler is usually going to be in the front. Well, that person's going to be waving that pole behind them with those sharp treble hooks in there. Something to consider. So spatial awareness is more important in a tandem fishing kayak. You're going to be better off with 2 solo fishing kayaks. That's another discussion in another video for another time there, obviously. But if you're wanting to do something like that, factor that into the decision. Price 2 solo fishing kayaks versus the motorized John boat if you're looking at going that route. Obviously, consider your long-term cost. So again, just like in the previous segment I just discussed, talking about storage cost. Can you store this boat or kayak in your garage or your driveway? If you're storing it outside, you're typically not going to want to do either one of them outside full time, especially if you're here in the South where we have multiple seasons and temperature changes. You know, if you've got a John boat, a motorized boat, you're going to want to look at a storage facility, and that is extra cost, of course. Insurance, obviously, most kayaks are going to be covered under your homeowner's insurance, under personal articles. If it's not motorized, you know, that's kayaks and canoes. But when you got a motorized boat, you're going to want to carry specific insurance on that. So again, fuel cost, launch fees, trailering is another thing too. If you're wanting to trailer a kayak and the John boat, you're obviously going to have to trailer the John boat. Your trailers for your boats are typically going to be a much more substantial investment. Even on the higher end, on your kayak trailers, it's typically going to be a lot cheaper and a lot better for you. Those are all things to consider. Your long-term cost, what you need that kayak or John boat to do. Ultimately, that's going to help you decide more than anything on which direction you need to go there. Okay, so finally, I'm going to just go over some things to consider if you're still not sure which direction you want to go. We talked about the long-term cost, your storage, your fuel, insurance, all of that. How are you going to transport this? Are you limited in a truck bed or a rooftop on an SUV? Those are going to kind of steer you more toward your kayaks. But is it just you going to be in the vessel, or is you wanting to carry multiple people with you? That's going to be the biggest thing to consider. But for me personally, obviously you guys know which one I prefer. I could go boat or I could go kayak. I choose kayak every time, regardless of budget or situation, just because it's a much more intimate experience out on the water. You get more in tune with your surroundings. And then also, most of my fish that I catch are within 4 feet or lower in your water depth. Your kayak, you're going to be able to access those spots a lot better, and you're going to do it a lot quieter. You're going to have that stealth factor. I've been out on the lake before on my kayak, and I've had a motorized boat come up to me, ask, hey, are you having any luck? Or you catching anything? That is something too. So a boat is not going to make a poor fisherman better, but just know the same person that's catching fish on the kayak is going to be able to catch fish no matter what. One over the other is not going to give you better chances to catch the fish, but the kayak may get you in some better spots for success. So I always tell people, is you can get into that shallow water. You can even kind of get up along the banks in some areas where bank fishing's not really, you're not able to do it, and cast parallel to the bank. That's where a lot of people catch those bigger fish, is in those spots where people can't walk up to the bank and fish off of it, so it doesn't get all that pressure. And finally, the thing that I would really consider is the fellowship of the kayak community. In my opinion, it's the best feature of the kayak community, is the camaraderie, the groups going out. There's fishing groups even here locally that they just focus on kayak fishing. You have groups that do non-motorized or motorized, or the sky's the limit, but nonetheless, you get a lot more camaraderie with the kayak community. That's probably why you guys are here on the channel, is you enjoy kayak fishing, you want to know more about it, you want to know more about what's out there. And from my personal experience, the boating industry, you don't really get that. If anything, you get a lot more clicks and a lot more confrontation with the boating community because everyone's sick of waiting at the boat ramp. They want to get those boats out of there. That's another thing too. With a kayak, you don't have to be waiting at the boat launch. You can launch anywhere where the water meets the land. And to me, that's one of the biggest benefits of kayaks over boats is you're launching. Even if you got a high-end fishing kayak and you got motors on it, you're still going to be able to, wherever that vehicle or wherever your kayak cart can get to, you're going to be able to launch that kayak now. You don't have to learn to back a trailer. You don't have to learn to, get that kayak off the trailer and back on the trailer, which you can still do that with a kayak, but you don't have to. And that's another thing. And also just the ease of access. So you don't have to have all the prep to get your kayak ready as you do a boat, even a John boat or a bass boat. So your prep time is greatly reduced, which gets you out on the water quicker. And honestly, there's just a pain in the rear end factor to doing that. So if you've been working all day and you just want to go out and fish, you're going to be able to throw that kayak in the back of that truck or on the trailer or on top of the roof, and you're just going to be able to go down the water and throw it in and fish for a couple of hours. Doing that with a boat is a little bit more of a pain in the butt just because a lot more prep and a lot more effort is needed to do that. So all things to think about. But anyways, guys, what do you guys think? So we've all kind of run into that situation where someone's saying, hey, just buy a boat. And a lot of the times, I would say 9 out of 10 times, it comes from a source of ignorance. Not anything against the person, just they don't know any better. And Chad Hoover did a video here about a year ago, kind of on the same topic, and he did a really good job on that. I'll link that down in the description as well, because again, it kind of mirrors some of the things that I'm talking about here, maybe from a different point of view. But we're kayak people, so obviously we're going to want you to go to kayaks, but there are some good arguments there. It's not usually the way it's presented out in your forums, obviously. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. We will see you on the next one.